you have to manage your mind and yourself first before you can manage anyone else well.
Hey friends, welcome back to Currently the Conversation, brought to you by TVC Cherry Capital Airport, your Northern Michigan connection. Today's guest is someone who has helped shape how brands show up in the world, not just through marketing, but through culture and leadership and values. Soon Hagerty is a senior leader at Hagerty, a longtime brand and communication strategist, and a founder who deeply believes that how we build matters just as much as what we build. Soon, welcome, and I'm so happy that you're here.
I'm so happy to see you again.
I know, I'm so happy to see you. You and I, we go back a bit, right?
Yes.
I was trying to think about, when did I first meet you?
Yeah, I mean, probably I would say at least 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I was listening to your show, and then you were kind enough to invite me, and that was so much fun. And
I love it.
I've been pining for it ever since then to come back.
Well, welcome to the new show, The Conversation. And, we're going to talk a lot today about communications and strategy and, career paths and leadership. But I love to start with the origin story, right? I think that the things that you experience in life really, really do make you who you are. And your life story kind of started with a little displacement. Your family fled Vietnam after the fall of Saigon. And, you had this experience of starting over. You're really young. So you're watching people navigate that. You're watching the adults in your world making these kind of impossible decisions. And that has to shape how you see the world.
Yeah, the older I get, the more I realize what you're saying is so true.
Mm-hmm.
When I meet somebody, once I learn their origin story, it really tells me who they are and who they're going to be. I was almost 5 years old, and my dad fought for the South Vietnamese alongside the Americans. And after the fall of Saigon, those who fought against the North were asked, or actually voluntold to join a re-education camp. So you can imagine there's no education happening there. So my parents knew that we had to have a better life. And so 6 kids in tow, faked Chinese passports and spent 12 days on a boat and 6 months in a refugee camp in Indonesia.
Oh my gosh.
And we are so lucky, my uncle, who also fought in the war, saved and went to the United States a few years earlier, saved $500 a month for 4 years to pay for our paperwork to come to the United States. So we came with literally $300 and no English with 6 kids.
Wow.
And my mom was pregnant, so 6.5 kids.
Wow.
So yes, talk about starting over, and quite a traumatic experience for the whole family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think about how that kind of background and watching just sort of this resilience. You don't know what to call it at the time, right? But that's what it was. It was, we're going to do this no matter what. We're going to get through these barriers. How does that affect the way you lead teams today?
I didn't realize the impact till I started my first agency in LA. I was 30 years old, and I started to have a little bit of success, and people would say, oh my gosh, you're 30, you own this business in LA, how do you do it? And I asked myself, how did I do this, right? I didn't grow up saying I need to start a PR agency, but watching my parents, they knew that, there's a long road to success and it's all hard work, but they were very resourceful. So a word I would use in addition to resilience is resourceful.
Yeah.
When you have to, you figure it out. There's no choice. And so when I think about that, I really think about leadership, which is resilience, resourcefulness, grit. And the most important thing that I tell young leaders is hard work is not enough. You have to be creative. You have to look around and say, what does this community need, or what does this world need, and what am I good at?
Interesting. Where do you think that, that sort of sense of responsibility, resourcefulness, grit, where do you think it shows up most in your work?
I would say entrepreneurship, even when I moved to Traverse City. So I moved to Traverse City about 17 years ago, and I come from LA where there's so much diversity and so much different food. And I got here and I was like, what the hell happened? And so I would start making Vietnamese food for my family and friends.
Yeah.
And all my friends would say, oh my gosh, you need to start a restaurant. And as you probably know, being a businesswoman, that restaurants are tough. There's not a lot of money in restaurants. But I said, this town needs some ethnicity. And this town is so full of philanthropy and community. What if I started my restaurant and donated $1 per bowl to charity as a way to thank the U.S. for taking us in? So when I think about that resourcefulness is, again, what do people need and what are you going to be good at? And I kind of knit those things together to create the Good Bowl.
As a way of thanking this country.
Yeah.
Wow. So I know with the Good Bowl, there's, sort of the local, the state, and the national charities that you can give to. I didn't realize behind that was a real sense of gratitude on your part.
Yeah. When I built the business model, I could have easily just said, okay, we're just going to give to local, which I think is really important. But I come from a different country. This country is made of people who come from different countries.
Yes.
And so I never wanted to devalue the global nature of what this country is. And so I was very adamant of giving 3 options for our guests: a local option, a national charity, and a global charity.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you've since stepped away from the Good Bowl and you have sold your shares to your partner. I'm so excited that it's still the Good Bowl,
yes,
right?
Yes,
I mean, it's still doing the good things and making the good food. But that was a real important decision, I think, in your life, and along with so many other decisions you've made. What was kind of the sort of final straw, if you will, of going, I think I need to step away from this? Yeah,
I think a couple of things. A couple of years ago, I heard this statistic, and it was the fastest growing group that considers suicide is girls between the ages of 6 to 12. And my daughter at that time was 10.
Oh, wow.
And so I really had to look at my life and say, okay, I'm 50 years old now, and I'm on this second half of my life, as they say, the back nine, what they use in golf. And I've got this incredible experience running 3 businesses, and I've got some resources where I can really make a difference. And so I love the restaurant. I love that we can make a difference, but I'm ready to think a little bit bigger. And how can I teach people how to fish versus just give them fish?
Right.
And so I launched our foundation to help women start their own business.
Yeah.
I think that if you can help women be successful, they can employ others, they can give back to their community, they can be financially independent. So I think the Good Bowl was one of the great stepping stones for this idea for growth and good. But I think ultimately running a foundation for women to start their own business is like a higher sense of that.
I really want to get into Boundless Futures, which I'm so excited to talk about. But I also want to spend a little time talking more about your experience with communications and building trust and strategy. And you have spent decades doing this. You mentioned starting your own agency at 30 years old. You have been an advisor to many, many leaders. You have had an incredible role at Hagerty. But before we, get into kind of that, what did your early career teach you about trust, about credibility?
Yeah, it's interesting. I coach a lot of female founders today through our foundation. And the first thing I talk to them about is you don't have a business unless you're solving somebody's problem.
Right.
And when you create a business, they essentially trust that you're going to solve their problem in exchange for their business. And so for me, trust is about keeping your word. Trust is about saying, Christal, if you buy this from me, I will do this from you. It sounds transactional, but it's actually a very emotional connection because people have so many resources and they have a lot of choice. And so when they come and say, I want to insure my loved car with Hagerty, I want to take my daughter for her 16th birthday to the Good Bowl. That's trust, right? Those are special moments in people's lives. So I think my earlier experience is about building a brand is all about a trust and exchange of faith.
Yeah. It's so interesting you mentioned the transactional nature of business, but I feel like that even in relationships, right?
Yeah.
Like if I trust you, if I love you, I expect that kind of transaction in return. And on a very different scale, we are doing that when we're giving our hard-earned money to whatever that might be, a service or an experience. We're hoping that the people on the other side are going to do their best.
Yeah, I think it's an expectation that, as a business you should uphold, but like you said, in relationships as well, because businesses aren't offices, they're people. They're people running these businesses. So I think trust is so vital.
Yeah, absolutely. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. Right. Getting into the Hagerty, the part of your life that is Hagerty, you've been a huge part of building a brand that people genuinely feel connected to. It's not just like, insurance. It's not just I'm a customer of Hagerty. It's like a community. And then Hagerty as a business is a larger part of the Traverse City and Great Lakes community. For people who don't know Hagerty as an insurance company, how do you describe what makes that culture and that brand so different?
It's interesting. That question goes back to your first question, which is the origin story.
Yeah, right.
I think Hagerty has one of the coolest origin stories. It started in the basement of Frank and Louise Hagerty's home.
Wow.
And they originally were insuring vintage boats, and they started to insure vintage automobiles. But the connection is people love to take care of their toys and the things that they're passionate about. But what people don't like to talk about is insurance. And so we knew really early on, and this is really kudos to McKeel's family and to McKeel and all the executives that worked there before me, is this idea that let's talk about things that people are passionate about. Let's make it easy for them to enjoy that passion. So I think it's really important to think about Hagerty as that community, but about, again, this promise that we're going to make it easy for you to do the things that you care about, not insurance.
Yeah. Insurance is boring, really, right? I mean, you have to know it, but I don't want to think about my own insurance. I'm just glad when I think about insurance, I think about my agents, right? And the trust and the credibility that they've built. And that's really what Hagerty has done.
Yeah, and we're teasing about insurance. It's not super fun, but it's super important to people, and so we make sure that we do that job well.
Yes.
And then I think what makes that community is we have that connection. When we do car shows, we'll stand there and people will walk up and we'll say, "Tell me about your car." Yes. We never say, "Talk to me about your insurance."
Right.
So I think it's like human nature. It's like when you listen, you create that connection with people.
You think about, you've mentioned this about how important storytelling is to any brand, but really to anything. And I think about classic cars as having those stories. And anyone that I've ever met that has any sort of classic automobile or classic boat, they're always talking about the stories. They don't talk about the performance or any of the other things. They're talking about who had this car before them, how they restored it, the time, the sweat equity they put into it, whether or not their kids helped, whether they, had someone else do it and they got to follow along on the process. I mean, it's like talking about your kids almost. It's like something you're very proud of where they've come from, right?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I have to tell you, when I'm working these events, and still till this day, I'll run into people, and if you better be ready for a half hour to ask someone about their car.
Yes.
And it's a good thing. You can't just say, "What car do you have?" Get ready. They will tell you the story. They will tell you where they found it. They will tell you everyone who owned it, exactly what you said. But I think at Hagerty, we recognize that and we appreciate that because we believe that we are stewards of these cars. We don't own these cars. We just help them along for the 10 years that they're in our possession because eventually they'll go to someone else.
Right.
So stewardship is really important to us.
It is. You're talking about the origins of Hagerty and starting in a basement, right? And boy, have you grown. I mean, enormous growth over the years. And even in particular in the years that you've been involved with Hagerty, I mean, growth is very exciting. And even as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you can say with every bit of excitement and growth, there's also tests involved, right? I mean, it's going to test your culture, your leadership. And what has it required of you as a leader to kind of maintain that alignment, getting back to what we want to promise people, trust, credibility, building community, honoring the stories, but at the same time, growing?
Yeah. I think any element of growth, whether you run a restaurant or you run Hagerty, really tests your ability to think strategically, but to also have that balance between taking care of the business and taking care of your employees.
Right.
It does test your ability to constantly be thinking about that, which levers you're going to pull.
Oh, sure.
So 2 years ago, I stepped away from an executive role, but now I'm in this consultancy role where I handle some of our VIPs, and I'm really in touch with what's happening with the business on an executive level. And I will tell you, especially as you grow, you do have to change your culture.
Yeah.
You do have to change how you think about your business. It's a responsibility. Mm-hmm. So if you think about if Hagerty had 500 employees versus 2,000, you have to change. You have to think about what does that makeup now look like? Mm-hmm. I think what's really tested our leadership is how do we think about Hagerty on a global basis? Yeah. Which means you're melding different cultures, you're melding different expectations, and you're melding different shareholders who are looking at your success.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a big leap into growth, is becoming a publicly traded company. I mean, how did that feel?
This is where I'm going to be really honest. Everybody says when you become public, you're going to change. And everybody says, no, I won't.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as like being a parent. I was
Right.
like, oh, no, I'll be the same old me. You'll be you, but you'll be a different version of you. And I think Hagerty is a different version of Hagerty. And I can tell you, being on the inside and being on the outside, I think it's a stronger company. Mm-hmm. I think we have a better view of a larger responsibility. When you're a family business, a private business, if you decide, you know what, like me, like running a restaurant, 8 years, I'm done, right? And I think my partner will do a good job. But when you're a publicly traded company, you're in it. Yeah. And you have a lot of responsibility. And I'm not just talking to the shareholders. I'm talking to the 2,000 employees that you have.
Yeah.
You can't just shut it down. You have to make it successful. So you have to sometimes make some tough decisions. And I think that's where sometimes public companies get an unfair testament that it's all about growth. No, it's about larger responsibility.
And we're here with Kevin Klein, Executive Director of TVC Cherry Capital Airport. And, I'm thinking about the summertime, which I do approximately 99% of the time here in Northern Michigan, right? And it's a good thing we're doing that, because now is the time, believe it or not, to plan for summer vacation. Where are we going, Kevin?
Dallas.
Yes.
I always...
Everybody wants to go to Texas, man.
And Texas is not only a great market for leisure for us, but it's also a great market for business. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our companies here in Northern Michigan do business in that northern Texas, Oklahoma area, that Dallas is a great nonstop destination. You have Denver.
Yeah.
Now, Denver, this is something special. They're starting this year even another week earlier than last year. And so they're starting at the end of April.
Perfect.
So Denver went for us and all the way to December 1st. So we're closing that gap, bringing it year round. So that Denver is an awesome opportunity to do that. Let's not forget, I got to go back to Texas a little bit. Houston.
Oh, I love it.
Houston will be operating this year nonstop. I love Houston, going down there. We went to the Kennedy Space Center. If you're a space nut, let me tell you, that is a fun tour to go through that facility and see all the rockets. Arizona, little dry heat we talked about.
We love a good dry heat.
Yeah, well, let's bring those people here towards us.
Yes,
how about
there
that?
There you go. So many opportunities for all of you to make your summer travel plans right now. Best way to do that is go to tvcairport.com. I'm thinking about how many different things you're doing right now. You mentioned that you left and you came back. Was there a reason that you left for 2 years?
Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about, taking care of my daughter and spending that time. I also felt like, I have spent over 20 years working at Hagerty, helping to build the brand. And I felt like Hagerty's in a great place. And I mean, honestly, I wanted to test myself. And I didn't really expect to talk about this, but I also felt like I had enough talent to be able to help others think through their entrepreneurship. And sometimes, being the wife of the founder can have its challenges.
Yeah.
I wanted to prove to myself and others that, yes, I can do other things than to work at my husband's company.
Right.
Even though he's my biggest champion.
Yes.
So, I mean, girl to girl, we all have moments where we think, okay, we're confident, we know what we're doing. But other times you want to say, you know what? I want to build something of my own.
Sure. And, you certainly built your own brand, your own business. You had your own success well before becoming the wife of the founder, right? But I do think people forget that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you meet people outside our community of Traverse City, they know my background. I've worked for global brands, but when you meet in Traverse City, it's the stigma. But, that's not the main reason why I transitioned to a consultancy role. But, I think us as individuals, we all want to continue to push ourselves and say, what else can you do?
Right.
So I think running the foundation to help other women was really where I wanted to spend a little bit more time.
It's such an incredible idea, first of all. And this is where I find it, I know the expression, we contain multitudes, but like you are an embodiment of that, right? I mean, you can be functioning as a really high level executive, someone who is providing, you're a consultant, you're working with very, very influential brands. And at the same time, you're starting this foundation that is like seeding the future almost. I mean, by giving female and entrepreneurs really just what they need to start. It can be so difficult to walk into a bank with an idea because maybe you've got some baggage that you didn't, realize that you had. Maybe you don't have the credibility that the bank is looking for. But you have this fantastic idea. And to have a foundation that is really there to say, hey, we believe in you, and we're also going to provide coaching to you.
Yes.
And, all these things, we're not just going to give you some money and say good luck.
Yeah.
Tell us about Boundless Futures, because honestly, with everything that you're doing, I think this is the thing I'm most excited about.
Me too. I loved your point about you're walking into a bank with an idea.
Yes.
And I can tell you, one of the main reasons we launched this foundation is when I found this statistic that 46% of small businesses in the U.S. are owned by women, but women get less than 3% venture capital. So there's lots of brilliant ideas that women and men have, but women don't have equal access to make their dreams come true.
Wow.
3% go to women. And yet women own almost 50% of small businesses in the U.S. So that will tell you the need.
Right.
And that will tell you the reality of why I started this foundation.
Yeah. Having the knowledge inside a major company and, also having experience alongside early stage entrepreneurs, what do women leaders right now, what do they need more of?
I mean, I think they need seats at the table. I think they need access to grants, access to funding to make their dreams come true. But also they need to be able to have that support to take some risk. Because I think when you think about that statistic I gave you, if you have less capital, you take less risks, which means you grow a lot slower than anybody else. Women need strong mentorship. They need to know that it's possible. They need the funding to make those things happen. And they really need a seat at the table where decisions are made.
Yeah, absolutely. You have some opportunities for people here, and I would advise people to go to boundlessfutures.org and read all about it. You offer Empower grants to female entrepreneurs 22 years of age and older. They have to have a business that is registered and operating solely within the United States. But you're talking about grants up to $50,000 in business support. That is more than I think a lot of people would ever even think of.
Yeah, we just increased it to this year. I mean, we think it's really important to be able to have that funding at the beginning, because that really accelerates the speed in which you're thinking about growing your business. Sometimes you have an idea, you're growing, and it takes 3 or 4 years. But with today's technology and to how fast people can start businesses, you need that capital pretty quickly to be able to invest in manufacturing or scaling. So yeah, I think $50,000 is a really strong amount, but I think the bigger thing that we do is the mentorship.
Yeah.
Every single grantee we give a grant to says, thank you so much for the money, but they said the mentorship has meant even more. And that's really powerful to us.
Yeah. Is there maybe an example of that sort of mentorship or something that you could share right now?
Yeah, actually, there's one of our first grantees. It's this lovely, these two young women, and they started this kit called Rescue in Color. It's really interesting. It's a bleed kit where it's at elementary school. So when there's somebody bleeding, that it's a really cool process where you can immediately identify how to help that person.
Wow.
And because we're able to give them that grant, one of the young founders was able to quit her business and work on it full time.
Wow.
And they were able to grow that business within a year pretty quickly.
Wow.
So giving her that cushion to be able to commit full time to her business really changed their business.
That is huge. I've never even, that's such a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what you're surrounded by. I mean, these applicants that are giving you coming with these great ideas, and then they also get the mentorship. You also have the Her Village grants too, which I think is important to note as well, because these are grants for nonprofits that share sort of, your organization's mission of sort of solving those systemic inequities with support for female founders, female leaders, female, workers. Tell us a little bit more about that and why that's an important piece.
When we launched the foundation, we could have easily just given it to individuals. But I started to see, we're just a team of 3 or 4 people. There are organizations that do this already. And I think it's really powerful to be able to support them, but to also learn from them. Instead of just giving them $125,000, which is what we give our nonprofits, we partner with them for the whole year.
Wow.
So we work together to create content. We work together to create events. We work together to mentor different grantees. And so it's this idea, it does take a village to help these individuals.
That's fantastic. What is a narrative about women in leadership that you'd love to see kind of dismantled?
Okay, is this only 30 minutes? Okay.
Sorry.
Jordan's looking at me like, okay.
Here we go,
Yeah,
Soon.
here we go. You know what? I think 2 key things, and a lot of it is based on research. The first is Daniel Goldman's emotional intelligence. I think more and more as leaders, this idea of EQ is so powerful, not only as a leader, but also as a senior executive or business owner. So I think women have just a softer side of this emotional intelligence. They have empathy. They understand what they do matters to the people around them. So I think this idea that emotional intelligence is going to be really pivotal. The second is the work by Brené Brown on vulnerability. I think the idea that having strong EQ and being vulnerable are bad has now changed.
Yeah, I do too.
I think most people understand with mental health, with 24-hour technology, that those leadership skills that women generally display are quite powerful. So I think the narrative needs to be, those are the things that I think will change the way that we work together.
I've witnessed in the, having been a part of a workforce for quite a few decades now, the culture in general has changed. The corporate culture has changed, organizational culture has changed. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I have noticed too, having worked for fantastic leaders who are men, but also fantastic leaders who are women, there is this sense of sort of an understanding, I think, that I may not have gotten from my male bosses,
Yeah, I think there are stereotypes, but I also think there are natural tendencies between men and women. I think natural tendencies for women is to be the caretaker, to be thoughtful, to be able to say, what's going on? It's interesting because the last 2 years I've been adamant about my work schedule. I work from 10 to 3 in terms of my meetings. I'm done at 3. Today, you are an exception.
Ooh,
Today's
thank you.
honestly one of the first times that somebody else has picked up my child from school.
Wow.
And I bring this up because generally the mothers or the females are picking up their kids. And what's the first thing they do? They ask the child, how are you? How did school go today?
Yeah.
So I think we're natural caretakers. We're naturally curious about how people are doing. And I think that means a lot to employees who spend 8 hours a day with you. I think, most of us spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our families on an average weekday.
That's true.
So it's important to really ensure that you know who this person that's walking to your office today, because they might not be the same person yesterday based on what's happening.
And, treating one of your employees with that kind of empathy, I think, and understanding, these are people who are helping to make your dream come true in a lot of ways, right? So they're really important to that. So I think even just acknowledging that is such an important thing.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. Well, we are at the end here, and so I want to do something like a little bit of rapid reflection. I'd love to ask you about a leadership lesson that you'd like to share, something that you've learned.
Well, I think the most important thing is recognizing that the most important person you manage is yourself.
Yes.
And once I started to recognize that just several years ago, I was starting to get really stressed about balancing all the things that you've talked about, right? Working at Hagerty full time, launching a foundation, running the restaurant. I started to really, feel like this incredible amount of stress. And I just said, okay, I need to actually manage my mind and myself first. So I do meditation 10 to 15 minutes a day. I write in my journal. So my leadership lesson is you have to manage your mind and yourself first before you can manage anyone else well. So
that's hitting me today as I was cut off driving here today, and I reacted in a way that I'm not proud of. I went, oh, you've got to manage yourself, lady.
Yes. You don't have to manage yourself all the time.
Oh,
just most of the time. Most of the time.
What is something about leadership that you're still actively learning now?
I think it's really this idea that I have to evolve with each organization and each thought process. And, with each organization, I think about the most powerful tool that I can access, which is you raise the bar high and you let others self-select out. And so I have to really say, okay, these are my expectations, and I have to be patient until I can really raise that bar where I find the right people that really surround me.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm learning something here. What about values? What is a value that you refuse to compromise on, no matter the role?
That's a good question. I would say through all the businesses I've worked at, one that I won't compromise on is kindness. I've been known to be very direct. I think coming from a family of 9, you have to scream at each other to be heard, right?
Yes.
You really do. But, being direct is one thing, being direct and kind is another. And my goal is when you're kind, even if you give feedback, they have to be able to get back up.
Yeah.
And so I think kindness is not negotiable.
My supervisor in my day job always says clear is kind.
Yes.
And I've learned so much from that. You don't have to be direct in a way that is going to hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah.
But being clear about your expectations is the kindest thing you can do.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I love that clear is kind because I think that means you respect that person.
Yeah. I love
that.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Well, I have so much respect for you, and I love all the things that you're doing. I would very much encourage people to go to boundlessfutures.org. You can find out what they're doing, how to get involved, and soon, how else can people connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I really love to talk about what's happening in the car world, what's happening in the entrepreneurship.
Yes, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Soon Hagerty, for being here today. It's just been fantastic. And thank you for listening to Currently the Conversation. It's brought to you by TVC Cherry Capital Airport. That is your Northern Michigan connection. And these are the conversations behind the brand. We'll see you next time.